The first alarm echoed through the human research base just after sunrise. A sharp digital tone that bounced off the metal corridors and made every worker look up. Most alarms in the base meant something: ordinary pressure changes, incoming shuttle, or a lab error. But this alarm was different. It came with a voice message. Trembling, broken, and clearly not human. The transmission repeated 3 times before the system paused. A soft cry, a whisper, and a desperate call for help that even the static could not hide. Mark Evans was the first one to stop walking and listen closely. He stood at the end of the main corridor, a mug of half-finished coffee in his hand, and stared at the ceiling speaker as if the voice might speak again. He'd been on this planet, Helion 3, for 6 months, helping the research crew build communication bridges between human outposts and alien sectors. Helion 3 was mostly peaceful, shared between humans and a native alien species called the Valen. The 2 groups worked in separate territories but respected each other's borders. At least, that was what the agreement said. The voice came again. Please, someone, please help me. This time it was clearer. Female, young, and definitely Valen. Mark felt his chest tighten. He set his mug down and rushed to the control center, where several technicians were already gathered around the central display. Screens showed an incoming transmission symbol pulsing bright red. A holographic waveform flickered above it. Who triggered the emergency channel? Someone asked. It's coming from outside our borders, another replied. About 28 kilometers east. Deep inside Valen territory, a few scientists exchanged uneasy glances. No human station was allowed there. According to the treaty, humans had no right to enter without permission from the Valen Council. The aliens were proud and strict about their internal laws. But then the voice came through again, louder this time, as if the sender had found a stronger signal. Please, humans, help me. They're going to take me. Please. The room fell silent. Mark felt something twist inside his chest. It wasn't just fear or confusion. It was instinct. The same instinct humans carried when someone cried for help, even across species, even across worlds. That kind of voice was universal. Commander Lei, the base supervisor, walked in with her usual steady stride. She listened quietly for a few seconds, then folded her arms. We need clarity. Who is she? Why is she asking us? The Valen don't usually contact humans for personal matters. One technician expanded the signal map. A blinking dot appeared near a cliff region known as the Broken Edge. A dangerous zone humans rarely approached. Heavy winds, unstable rocks, and rumored Valen patrols made it off limits. But there the voice was, fading, weakening. Please. I don't want to disappear. Mark stepped forward before anyone else reacted. We need to send a rescue team. Another scientist shook his head. We can't interfere. Their justice system is their own. Humans stepping in might trigger conflict. Done. Mark clenched his jaw. A girl is begging for help. That means something is wrong. Someone's chasing her. Someone wants to harm her or take her away. We can't ignore that. Commander Lee looked conflicted. She cared about safety. She cared about peace. But she also cared about morality. That was why Mark respected her. We'll try another approach, she said. Open a channel. Let's ask her who she is. They attempted communication. Static. Then a faint response. My name is Lyra. They say, I must be punished. But I didn't do anything. Please. Help me. Her words broke into sobs. Nobody in the room moved. The weight of her fear wrapped itself around them all. Lee exhaled slowly. Something's very wrong. The Valen Council said nothing about pursuing a criminal. And Lyra sounds very young. Mark took a step closer to the commander. Let me go. I can track the signal. If I find her, and she's in danger, I'll bring her back. If not, I won't interfere. You can't go alone, Lee warned. But Mark shook his head. A rescue team will be noticed instantly. One human might slip through without attracting their entire patrol. She stared at him for a long moment. seeing that stubborn determination humans were known for. Finally, she gave a small nod. You have 2 hours. After that, I'm sending a drone to bring you back, whether you found her or not. Mark grabbed his gear and headed out. The landscape of Helion 3 was a strange mixture of plains, sharp rock formations, and glowing plants that shimmered under the morning sun. The air smelled faintly metallic. Wind carried dust in long, swirling ribbons. Mark moved quickly, following the portable scanner in his hand. The blinking arrow pointed east, but the signal wavered constantly, as if the transmitter was damaged or its owner was on the move. After an hour of climbing steep stone hills, Mark paused to catch his breath. The wind was stronger here, pulling at his jacket and whipping dust against his visor. He checked the scanner again. The signal had dropped. He frowned. Come on, Lyra. Don't stop now. He walked further along the ridge, careful with each step. The rocks here were sharp and unstable. One wrong move could send him tumbling into the canyon below. As he approached a narrow passage, he heard something faint so soft it blended with the wind. A small whimper. Mark froze. He turned toward a cluster of jagged stones, forming a natural cave. The sound came from inside. Moving slowly so he wouldn't frighten whoever was hiding, Mark stepped into the shade of the rocks. A pair of glowing blue eyes flashed in the darkness. He lifted his hands calmly. Lyra? Silence. Then a shaky voice answered. Who are you? I'm human. I heard your call for help. I'm here to make sure you're safe. Something shifted in the shadows, and then she stepped out. Lyra looked young, maybe the equivalent of a human teenager. Her skin shimmered like pearl, mixed with soft lavender tones. Valen markings glowed faintly along her arms, and her hair was woven with small beads that rattled softly when she moved. But her face was streaked with tears. Her breathing was uneven, and she held a broken communicator tightly in her hands. She stared at Mark with a mixture of fear and relief. You really came. Mark nodded gently. Yes. Are you hurt? She wiped her face quickly. Not hurt. Just scared. They're coming for me. The judges. The enforcers. They said I broke tradition. They said my actions brought dishonor. And they want to take me away. Mark frowned. What did you do? She hesitated, lowering her eyes. I helped a human child. Yesterday. She fell near our border and injured her leg. I carried her back to your people. I thought helping someone was right. Her voice trembled. But my clan says I violated old rules. They say I should have left her there. They say I interfered with fate. Mark felt his stomach twist. Helping a child? And she was punished for that? He crouched down a little so his height would not intimidate her. You did the right thing. No one should be punished for helping someone else. Quote, her glowing eyes softened, but fear still clung to her expression. My people think humans are dangerous. They think you trick others. They think saving your child means I betrayed my own kind. Mark shook his head firmly. We don't hurt people who help us, and we won't let anyone hurt you. As if the planet wanted to confirm his words, a loud echo boomed through the canyon. Lyra's head snapped around in fear. Mark stood up quickly and moved to shield her. Dust shook from the rocks above. Wind shifted direction. Voices, alien voices, sharp, commanding, growing louder. Lyra clutched his jacket. They found me. Mark pulled her behind a large boulder, keeping himself between her and the sound. He scanned the area quickly. Shadows moved along the ridge above them. 3 figures in dark armor, Valen enforcers, searching the area. Lyra trembled like someone bracing for judgment. Mark kept his voice steady. Stay low. Stay quiet. I won't let them take you. She looked up at him, stunned. Why? You're not one of my people. Maybe not, Mark said softly. But you asked for help. And humans don't walk away from someone in danger. The enforcers' voices grew louder. Mark glanced at the narrow passage behind them, too risky. The cliff on their left, too steep. The only safe direction was forward, toward the canyon's deeper path. He took Lyra's hand and whispered, We're leaving. Now. Lyra nodded, trusting him. They slipped out from behind the boulder and moved deeper into the canyon, using the shadows to hide their shapes. Mark kept his steps light, his senses sharp, ready to shield her if needed. Behind them, the enforcers continued searching, but the canyon was wide, the echoes confusing. For the moment, Mark and Lyra stayed undetected. After several minutes of quiet running, they reached a small opening between two tall rock walls. Lyra collapsed to her knees, exhausted. Mark knelt beside her. "We're almost safe," he said gently. "Once we reach human territory, they can't follow." She looked up with teary eyes. "Thank you, Mark." He blinked in surprise. "You know my name?" She smiled faintly. "I've heard your people say it in their reports. They said you're brave, that you stand up for others. I hoped, if anyone came, it would be you." His chest warmed unexpectedly. "You called the right person." But just as the tension began to ease, a new sound echoed from behind them, closer than before. A Valen enforcer's shout. Lyra's eyes widened. Mark stood up instantly, scanning the canyon walls. They weren't safe yet, and the real danger was just beginning. The shout echoed sharply through the canyon walls, bouncing from one jagged stone surface to another. Mark pulled Lyra to her feet immediately. Her legs trembled, but she didn't resist. She could hear the metallic steps approaching, slow, steady, and confident. The Valen enforcers were no longer searching. They were closing in. Mark guided her deeper into the narrow path. The walls here were tall and smooth, almost forming a natural tunnel. Only a thin ribbon of sky was visible far above. The shadows were heavy, helpful for hiding but dangerous for moving. The ground was uneven and filled with scattered stones. Lyra stumbled once, but Mark caught her arm before she fell. "Easy. Just stay with me," he whispered. She nodded, breathing hard. "I'm trying, but I've never run this much in my life." "You're doing great," he said softly. "Humans run all the time. We're stubborn that way." Even in the darkness, she managed a tiny smile. But the danger behind them didn't pause. The echoes grew clearer, sharper. The enforcers were tracking them with a precision that made Mark uneasy. Valen warriors were skilled hunters. Their armor was designed to lock onto traces of energy, sound, even the faintest scent. Mark needed a distraction, something to slow them down. As they moved forward, his eyes scanned the canyon carefully. A small idea formed when he noticed a pile of loose stones leaning against one wall. He stopped and placed a hand gently on Lyra's shoulder. "Stay behind me, and cover your ears." She didn't ask why. She trusted him enough to obey instantly. Mark lifted one heavy rock and slammed it against the pile. The stones shifted, rattled, then collapsed loudly across the path behind them. Dust exploded upward in a cloud. The canyon trembled with the noise. For a moment, visibility dropped to zero. Mark grabbed Lyra and ran again. The echo of falling rocks now mixed with angry shouts from the enforcers, who were forced to slow down. Stones blocked their path, creating temporary barriers. Lyra looked back over her shoulder and whispered, "Did that work?" "For a few minutes," Mark replied. "But we stay ahead." They pushed through another winding turn in the canyon. The shadows finally opened into a wider space, a circular clearing between the cliffs. Strange glowing plants grew around the edges, illuminating the ground with gentle blue light. Lyra touched one of the glowing leaves as they passed. "These only grow in sacred areas," she whispered. "This place is old. Very old." "Sacred?" Mark asked. "Will your people come here?" She shook her head quickly. "Not unless they have a reason." "But searching for me." Her voice trailed off. She didn't want to finish the sentence. Mark tightened his grip on her hand. "We'll be out before they reach here. We just need to keep moving west." Human territory is less than 8 kilometers away. To a human, that distance was manageable. To an exhausted alien girl being hunted by her own people, it felt endless. But she nodded bravely. They walked through the clearing, moving toward another narrow passage. Lyra's breathing steadied. For a moment, She let herself imagine reaching safety, imagine a place where her choices weren't judged by ancient laws. But just before they reached the next passage, a sudden flicker of purple light flashed ahead. Mark stopped so fast that Lyra walked into his back. He held up a hand, signaling silence. A Valen enforcer stepped into view at the far end of the passage. His armor shimmered with dark violet energy, and his eyes glowed like burning coals. He hadn't seen them yet, but he was scanning the area carefully. Lyra whispered, "That's a high-rank enforcer." "They sent him too?" Mark exhaled slowly. "He's blocking the exit. We need another way." He looked around. The circular clearing had no other path except the one they came from, and the one now blocked by the enforcer. The canyon walls were too steep to climb. The enforcer suddenly raised a small device. A pulse of energy spread outward, gliding across the clearing. It wasn't a weapon. It was a scanner. Lyra grabbed Mark's arm tightly. "He'll detect me." Mark immediately pulled her into the shadows behind a large curved rock formation. The scanner pulse passed through the clearing, humming softly. Mark held his breath. So did Lyra. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of alien technology. And then, silence. The enforcer seemed uncertain. He scanned again, slower this time. The pulse returned, but the shadows where Mark and Lyra hid were deep enough to interrupt the reading. Mark leaned close, whispering so softly she barely heard him. "Lyra, I need you to trust me again. We're going to move quietly along the wall. Stay low." Her eyes widened. "Toward him? He won't expect someone to approach him from the side. He's watching the open area." She swallowed hard. "I trust you." They crouched and began moving along the far edge of the clearing, staying hidden behind the shadows cast by the tall rock formations. The glowing plants made it tricky, but Mark kept them in the darkest sections of the wall. Every few steps, he paused and listened. The enforcer continued scanning. Growing more frustrated at the lack of results, halfway across the clearing, he suddenly turned his head. Lyra froze. Mark gently pressed her against the wall, shielding her with his body, hoping their combined silhouette blended into the shadow. The enforcer stared in their direction. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Then he looked away, muttering something in the Valen language. Mark took a slow breath. Lyra's fingers clutched the fabric of his jacket. When they finally reached the far wall, Mark found a small natural crack between two giant stones, just wide enough for them to squeeze through. He pushed Lyra inside first, then followed. On the other side was a narrow hidden path that bent sharply to the left and out of view of the clearing. Lyra sagged with relief. "You saved us again. We're not safe yet," Mark said gently, though he gave her a reassuring smile. "But we're doing well." "A formant. Thanks for watching. Amina Changes of the Visited." "We're not safe yet." They moved deeper into the hidden path. The air here felt cooler. The wind didn't reach inside, and the walls glowed faintly from ancient mineral deposits. It felt almost like a secret tunnel formed by nature itself. Lyra touched the wall thoughtfully. "I've never been this far from my territory. I didn't think I would ever walk in places like this." Mark glanced at her. "Were you always kept close to your clan?" She nodded slowly. "My people live by traditions older than memory. We are taught our roles from childhood. We are taught what not to do, who not to help, where not to go, and you helped the injured human child anyway," Mark said softly. Lyra closed her eyes for a moment. She was crying. She was hurt. It didn't matter who she was. She needed someone. Mark smiled sadly. "That's humanity's logic too. If someone needs help, we help. But my people don't see it that way," she whispered. "They think kindness must follow rules. Kindness that follows rules isn't kindness," Mark replied. "It's obedience." Lyra looked at him with wide eyes. "No one from my clan would ever say something like that." "That's because humans are different," Mark answered. "And that's why I won't let them take you." Her throat tightened. She didn't know why, but she believed every one of his words. They continued walking until the narrow path opened into a broader canyon again, this one much quieter and darker than the previous ones. A thin mist drifted across the ground. The air was colder, Somewhere distant, water dripped rhythmically. Mark checked his scanner. The signal of human territory was stronger now. "We're almost there," he said. But Lyra suddenly tensed. She grabbed his arm, eyes wide with fear. "Mark, what's wrong?" She pointed upward. On the high canyon ledge above them stood three silhouettes, three Valen enforcers watching silently, their armor glowing faintly in the dim light. Mark's heart dropped. "How long have they been there?" Lyra trembled. "They must have followed us through the hidden path." The enforcers didn't shout. They didn't rush. They simply stood, blocking the canyon's only exit. Then the high-rank enforcer from earlier stepped forward. His voice boomed through an amplifier. "Lyra, of the Pearl Line. By the order of the Valen Council, you are commanded to surrender." Lyra pushed herself behind Mark instinctively, shaking. "They'll drag me away, Mark." "They won't listen," the enforcer continued. "Human, step aside. She is ours by law." Mark straightened his posture and placed himself firmly between Lyra and the enforcers. "She asked for our help, and humanity doesn't ignore a plea for help." The enforcer's eyes narrowed. "This is not your conflict." "It became my conflict," Mark replied. "The moment she cried out for help." In way, the other enforcers shifted, preparing to descend the cliff. Lyra clutched the back of Mark's jacket. "Please don't let them take me." Mark whispered back, "I won't. I promise." Then he looked up again, eyes steady, voice calm but firm. "If you want her," he said to the enforcers, "you'll have to go through me." A tense silence filled the canyon. The Valen enforcers stepped forward, and the real confrontation began. The wind in the canyon grew colder as the Valen enforcers stepped forward on the high ledge. Their silhouettes looked sharp against the dim sky, and their glowing armor pulsed with quiet threat. Mark felt Lyra trembling behind him, her fingers gripping the fabric of his jacket with desperate force. He didn't move. He stood tall, steady, and unshaken. Even as three alien warriors locked their attention on him, one of the enforcers leaped down first. His landing was silent, controlled, almost graceful despite the heavy armor. The other two followed, landing on either side of him. Together, they formed a triangular formation, closing the distance slowly. Lyra whispered, "They won't stop. They follow orders without question." "They were trained for this," Mark replied softly. "And humans were trained for something else. We protect." The high-rank enforcer stepped closer. His armor glowed a deeper shade of purple, a mark of command. "You have crossed into a sacred matter," he said, voice echoing in the canyon. "Step aside and release the girl." Mark stood his ground. "I'm not releasing anyone." The enforcer tilted his head slightly. "You endanger peace between our species." "Peace," Mark replied with calm firmness. "Peace doesn't exist when a young girl is hunted for doing the right thing." The enforcer's jaw tightened. He was not used to being questioned. "Her actions broke ancient law." "Then your law is broken," Mark said, "because helping a child is not a crime." Lyra looked at him with wide, trembling eyes. No one in her life had ever spoken like that. Not to an enforcer. Not to someone carrying the council's authority. Her heart pounded with fear, but somewhere inside her, something warm spread too. A feeling she didn't have a name for yet. The enforcer lifted a hand. "Last warning, human." Mark shook his head. "No." Silence dropped over the canyon. The nearest enforcer moved first. He stepped forward, but not with violence. Instead, he approached carefully, studying Mark like an unusual creature. "You are outnumbered. You carry no weapon," the enforcer said. "What makes you believe you can protect her?" Mark held Lyra's hand in his. "Because she believes in me." The enforcer paused. For a moment, something like confusion flickered across his alien face. Valen culture valued strength, discipline, honor, but belief? Trust? That was a human thing, a strange thing, a powerful thing. The high-rank enforcer lifted his hand, signaling orders. The three enforcers spread out, preparing to surround Mark and Lyra. Lyra's breath caught. "Mark, please." "They'll overpower you," he whispered. "I'm not going to fight them like they expect." Before she could ask what he meant, the enforcers moved. Two advanced from the sides. The high-rank one came from the front. Mark didn't reach for a weapon, he had none. Instead, he pulled a small cylindrical device from his belt and slammed it onto the ground. A sudden burst of white smoke exploded outward. The enforcers halted, scanning mode disrupted. Their armor sensors flickered. The canyon filled with thick haze, blocking vision, confusing sound. Lyra gasped. "What is that?" "A human trick," Mark whispered. "We don't need armor to fight, we make cover." He grabbed her hand and ran toward the right wall of the canyon. The smoke concealed their movements long enough for them to slip behind a cluster of sharp rocks. Mark guided Lyra through a narrow gap between the stones. The moment they reached the far end of the gap, they found themselves entering a hidden slope leading upward, winding tightly against the cliff. The path was steep, but safe enough to climb. Lyra followed him breathlessly. "You knew this place was here?" "No," Mark admitted. "But humans don't freeze when the path is unclear. We move. We try. We trust our choices." Her heart thumped. "That's different from my people." "Different is good," Mark said gently. Below them, the smoke began to clear. Alien voices echoed sharply. He moved toward the wall. "No energy signature is faint. He's hiding her." The high-rank enforcer roared. "Find them." Mark and Lyra reached the top of the slope just as the smoke faded completely. From above, they watched the enforcers spreading out below like hunters frustrated by clever prey. Lyra touched Mark's arm gently. "You're risking everything for me." He met her gaze. "No one should fear their own people. And no one should be punished for kindness." She lowered her eyes, overwhelmed. "My people say humans are chaotic, emotional, unpredictable. And what do you think?" he asked. Lyra looked up at him again. "I think humans are brave." Mark smiled at her softly. "Then, let's keep going." 2. They turned and followed the upper path. The canyon became wider here. The sandy ground softer under their feet. Faint sunlight filtered through cracks above, creating patches of warm light along the walls. Lyra felt the air change slightly less dry, more breathable. "How far to human territory?" she asked quietly. "About 5 kilometers, he answered. "We'll make it." But the moment he said that, a deep vibrating hum filled the sky. Lyra froze. Mark looked up sharply. A Valen patrol drone flew overhead. Its violet scanning beam swept across the canyon like a searching eye. "They sent drones?" Mark muttered. "They're escalating fast." Lyra trembled. "A drone can send exact coordinates. They'll surround us from all sides." Mark grabbed her hand. "Not if we get out of the canyon." They started running. The canyon sloped downward into a wider valley, where tall stone formations shaped like towering pillars created a maze-like path. Mark and Lyra moved through the pillars quickly, using them as cover each time the drone's beam passed overhead. Lyra whispered anxiously. "Mark, they're calling more enforcers on the southern ridge." Mark listened. He could hear faint metallic stomps echoing from behind. He tightened his grip on her hand. "Stay close. We're almost out." They dashed between the pillars, ducking each time the drone beam flickered. Lyra's breath quickened, but she kept moving. She trusted his pace. She trusted his strength. Then Mark noticed something ahead, a narrow opening between two massive rock pillars. On the other side, sunlight poured through like a guiding path. "That's our exit," he said. They sprinted toward it. But just before they reached the opening, the drone above let out a sharp, high-pitched alarm. It had detected movement. A violet beam shot downward, hitting the ground right behind them, scorching the sand. Lyra yelped and stumbled forward, but Mark grabbed her before she fell. "We need to keep moving," he urged. The drone descended lower, scanning wildly, trying to lock onto Lyra's energy signature. The enforcer's footsteps grew louder behind them. The exit was only a few steps away. Mark pulled Lyra through the opening, and they stumbled into blinding sunlight and open air. The land ahead stretched into a wide plain covered with wind-swept grass and small glowing shrubs. In the far distance, barely visible, was the tall metallic antenna of the human outpost, but between them and safety stood two more Valen enforcers. They had predicted the escape route. Lyra's breath stopped in her throat. Mark, he scanned the area quickly. The left side of the plain dropped into a steep ravine. The right side was a thick field of tall, crystalline plants that made movement slow and noisy. No good options. The two enforcers stepped forward. One held an energy staff that glowed bright. The other carried a restraint device. The high-rank enforcer from earlier stepped out behind them. He had climbed the canyon wall faster than they expected. His voice carried across the plain. Human. This is the final warning. Release the girl. Lyra squeezed Mark's hand tightly. They'll take me far away. I'll disappear. Please. Mark. Mark looked at her with steady eyes, full of quiet strength. I promised I wouldn't let them take you. She swallowed, voice trembling. But how? They're all around us. Mark's grip on her hand tightened. Humans don't give up, he said softly. Especially not when someone innocent depends on us. The enforcers began advancing. The drone above lowered its scanning beam. The ravine wind roared, and Mark knew he had one chance, one risky, unpredictable chance left to protect her. He stepped in front of Lyra, shielding her again, even as the enforcers approached from every direction. The moment of decision had arrived. The plain felt too quiet, as if the wind itself was holding its breath. Mark stood in front of Lyra, with his feet planted firmly in the sand, his shoulders steady, and his eyes fixed on the advancing enforcers. Lyra stayed behind him, her small, trembling form barely visible. But her grip on the back of his jacket told him everything. She was terrified, but she trusted him completely. The high-rank enforcer stepped closer, his armor glowing with cold authority. You are surrounded. You cannot protect her. Do not make this worse for your people. Quote, Mark didn't move. If protecting someone makes things worse, then maybe the problem isn't with my people. The enforcer's eyes narrowed. Humans speak boldly. But boldness doesn't change truth. She committed an act forbidden by our traditions. Mark shook his head firmly. She saved a child. If your tradition punishes kindness, then it isn't justice. Lyra swallowed hard. She had grown up her whole life believing the enforcers were the strongest, most unquestioned figures in her world. And now, a single human stood before them without armor, without weapons, with nothing but determination, and they hesitated. They were measuring him, trying to understand what made him challenge them so fearlessly. The drone above shifted lower, its scanning beam sweeping dangerously close. The two enforcers in front lifted their staffs. Behind Mark, Lyra whispered shakily. Mark, please don't get hurt because of me. He gently squeezed her hand without looking back. I'm not getting hurt. I'm getting you home. Then something unexpected happened. A sharp, whirling sound echoed from the far distance. The ground vibrated lightly. The drone above paused, its sensors detecting a sudden energy signature approaching fast. The enforcers noticed it too. They turned their heads toward the horizon. Far away, a small dark shape flew across the sky straight toward them. Lyra gasped softly. What is that? Mark recognized it instantly. Human drone. High-speed model. Commander Lee must have deployed it early. The Valen enforcers reacted immediately. The high-rank leader raised his gauntlet and shouted an order in the Valen language. The two enforcers in front shifted into defensive stance. The drone above tightened its scanning radius. Mark leaned closer to Lyra. Stay behind me and get ready to move. But where? Toward the outpost. We just need an opening. The human drone grew larger as it sped toward them. It wasn't a weapon drone, it was a communication and support drone, but it carried powerful sound disruptors and bright flares. More importantly, it could buy time. The Valen drone shot a warning beam at it, but the human drone dodged smoothly, weaving through the air with mechanical precision. When it reached a safe distance above Mark and Lyra, it released a blinding flare. Bright white light exploded across the plain. The Valen enforcers staggered back, armor sensors reacting to the sudden overload. The drone above flickered, momentarily blinded. Mark didn't waste a second. "Lyra, run." She didn't hesitate. She followed him instantly, sprinting across the sand. Her legs were shaking, her heart pounding, but Mark kept her close, guiding her through the blinding light and debris thrown up by the wind. Behind them, the enforcers recovered quickly. "After them!" the high-rank leader roared. Footsteps thundered behind them. Lyra stumbled once, but Mark caught her arm and pulled her up without slowing. "Keep going. We can make it." The plain stretched out endlessly in front of them. The human outpost tower, a long silver antenna, shimmered faintly in the distance, like a promise of safety. But the enforcers were gaining speed. Their armor enhanced their movements. They were trained for pursuit. One of them leaped forward, closing the distance with terrifying ease. Lyra sensed him behind them and cried out, pulling closer to Mark. "He's right behind us!" Mark turned sharply, grabbing a handful of sand as they ran. When the enforcer lunged forward, Mark threw the sand into the air, hitting the alien's faceplate. The enforcer flinched, momentarily blinded, stumbling back. "Go!" Mark shouted, pulling Lyra forward again. She followed, breath shaking, tears at the corner of her eyes. Not from fear, but from something else. Something she had never felt before. Someone was fighting for her. Someone was risking everything for her. No one in her clan had ever done that, but the danger wasn't gone. The second enforcer, faster than the first, charged straight at them. His staff crackled with purple energy. Mark turned, ready to shield Lyra with his own body. But then the human drone swooped down again, releasing another flare directly in the enforcer's path. The alien threw his arms up, stumbling back. Mark whispered to Lyra, "That drone is buying us every second it can. What happens when it stops?" She whispered weakly. "Then I'll keep buying seconds myself." Her heart squeezed at his words. They ran through the tall, glowing shrubs, which glimmered softly under the fading sunlight. For a moment, the world felt unreal. Lyra's breath hitched. She had never seen the plains from this angle before. She had never felt wind like this. She had never seen humans act the way Mark did, without hesitation, without calculation, without fear. Behind them, the high-rank enforcer jumped down the small ridge and barked orders. The Valen drone recovered its vision and began tracking again. "They're gaining on us," Lyra cried softly. Mark saw it too. They were fast, and the outpost was still too far. Then he saw something to the right, a cluster of metallic debris partially buried under sand. Old human survey equipment from abandoned expeditions. An idea sparked. He grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her sharply to the right. She followed without question. "What are we doing?" she gasped. "Hiding in plain sight," Mark said. He led her behind the old metallic equipment, ducking low. The twisted metal reflected heat signatures chaotically. Mark used a piece of broken panel to block their energy traces. The Valen drone scanned the area but couldn't lock onto a stable reading. The enforcers spread out, searching. Voices echoing through the plains. Lyra pressed close to Mark, breathing shallowly. "How did you know this would work?" "Humans leave all kinds of things everywhere," he whispered. "Even our trash can save lives." She let out a tiny laugh through her fear. They stayed silent as the enforcers passed dangerously close. One even brushed against the metal Mark was holding. Mark didn't blink. Lyra didn't breathe. Finally, the enforcers moved past them, chasing deeper into the plains. The human drone shifted high again, scanning for Mark's signal. It let out a soft locator beep. Mark exhaled. "We're moving again," quietly. They crawled out from the debris and began moving toward the outpost, slower this time but safer. As they crossed the last stretch of the plain, Lyra's legs almost gave out from exhaustion. Mark supported her, letting her lean against him. "I never thought I would reach this far," she whispered weakly. "You're stronger than you think," Mark replied softly. "Your people didn't see it, but I do." Her throat tightened. When they were less than 500 meters away from the outpost fence, the high-rank enforcer appeared again, this time alone, circling around the long path like a silent shadow. He stepped forward and stood in their way. Lyra gasped in terror. Mark stepped in front of her once again. The enforcer looked at Mark for a long moment, then at Lyra. His voice was quieter this time, almost controlled. "You are making a mistake." She belongs to us. She is Valen. She must face what her people demand. Mark didn't raise his voice. Her people don't get to decide everything she is. You cannot protect her forever. I don't have to protect her forever, Mark replied calmly. The enforcer studied him. His glowing eyes flickered, confused by a type of strength he had never encountered before. Strength without weapons, without armor, without orders. Strength born purely from conviction. Finally, he lowered his staff slightly. You humans are strange. Mark relaxed only a fraction. We get that a lot. The enforcer turned his gaze to Lyra. Your choice will change everything. Lyra stepped forward slowly, staying behind Mark's protective arm but lifting her chin bravely. My choice already did. The enforcer held her gaze for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he stepped back. He didn't speak. He didn't attack. He simply turned away and walked back toward the plains, leaving them behind. Lyra stared in shock. Why? Why did he do that? Mark watched the enforcer disappear into the distance. Because he finally saw something stronger than his orders. What? Humanity, Mark said softly. Lyra's eyes filled with relief and something warmer. They walked toward the outpost together. As soon as they reached the boundary shield, human guards rushed out, guiding them inside. Lyra sagged into Mark's side. Exhausted but safe, Commander Lee stood waiting. Mark. Lyra. You made it. Lyra looked at Mark with trembling gratitude. I'm safe because of him. Mark smiled gently. You're safe because you didn't give up. Lyra's cheeks warmed. And because humans protect those who need them. Mark nodded. Always. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt free from ancient rules, free from judgment, free from fear. And she knew one thing clearly. Humanity hadn't just protected her. They had changed her future forever.